Okay, so I'm doing this medical report to help myself and those who may be personally affected by medical health issues that concern, in some most cases, women, and now in some cases men, and that's regarding hormonal changes, regarding estrogen, progesterone. I know there's not a lot of information here at Planet Radio. We hope to address it really quickly, efficiently, the best way we can. Well, if you've been diagnosed with a tumor, it didn't start there. It started way back before you got the tumor. And usually there's a couple factors that I found, having personally been through this and recovering. And this journey has been long and hard for me. So hopefully I'll be able to touch on a lot of topics. The changes were pretty obvious to me in my mid-20s. I did not have the same sex drive that I had before, which I know, if you know anything about having a high sex drive, you know that's pretty obvious when your sex drive changes. And then, of course, the physical changes that come with it, the extreme weight gain, some other factors. And going through this, I had learned that other people had more obvious tumors. Mine was more hidden. Well, not so much hidden because it caused weight gain. But in this case, I found this story very interesting about Angie. She had a 7-year-old face bump, which in fact tumors have a way of affecting your life in great ways, but this was more obvious. Her tumor was found on her right side of her chin. It started out as just a lump, and of course then grew. Now these doctors at Extreme Surgery Update helped her in having this tumor removed. This plastectomy, I believe, is the right word for it. I'm not quite sure if I said it right. But they did, in fact, schedule surgery right after this show, and they did an update, and I will put the links below. But here's the difference of that surgery. So she went from that to that. So it's obvious when there's a medical concern, it can actually change the actual, in her case, obviously, it literally physically changed the way she looked for the before and after. It's obvious. And that's what I'm trying to address, is that there's obvious changes in some. In her case, it was more obvious because it was 5 months. The surgery was successful. And luckily for her, after 5 months, there were obvious changes. Mine was located in my abdomen area, so it obviously changed my whole body, my whole physical, I would say physically changed my whole appearance. And people that normally saw me, they didn't understand what happened to me when I can quite write. I didn't know how to explain it because I was just trying to overcome some of the grief that came with it. And one of the things I ran into is if you don't have the support of healthy people around you, it's going to be very difficult. It was probably the hardest part, is not having support. And I did get a lot of prayer support, and I started over a period of time. I started meeting people at church, and I was in the middle of a bunch of stuff when I went through this. So I really couldn't get the right kind of support I needed. And I so emphasize how serious that is, because it's one of those stumbling blocks that you should not have to encounter. Mine just happened at the worst time. I was going through the middle of a move, and I was going through a major separation, and it was already really bad. My move, everything was happening. And when I went to the doctors, and it just happened by accident, that I had a bump on my stomach, and they found the tumor. And the tumor was, of course, diagnosed, and then I obviously had to go through a bunch of other treatments. And one of them is I was sent to a cancer center to do regular, basically they put me on vancomycin because they wanted to get the infection down. And I actually had infections and things like that, and I could not explain it. I just knew I had argued back and forth with certain people that there was something not right here. And one of the things I ran into is the vaccinations and some of the pharmacology, some of the medicines that were given today. And I didn't know, but I knew there was something different this time. And one of the things I noticed is that in some of these immunizations or shots that's given to you, you don't know. And mine could have been it could have been fatal for me. And I knew it. And I don't think anybody would listen to me at that point. And I still don't think they would have listened to me, no matter what I would have said. I just knew this foreign agent's going into my body, and I'm not feeling good. And I came to find out that HPV has similar effects. Some people have been paralyzed by HPV. I'm not quite sure. I just know I walked out of there not the same person. And I was having problems that I normally didn't have. I was having, blacking out. I was having speech problems, and all these things all seemed to come down to something. I was never diagnosed with autism. I never had any of these other problems, but I was having other difficulties. Being hypervigilant was one of them, and I had to learn to overcome a lot of things, and I'm still on that journey. And one of the things is these crying spells. I had horrific crying spells. So I knew it was attached to the hormones. It made perfect sense once I finally started doing my more homework. And one of the things I noticed about this and the changes that are happening in our bodies, whether you're a man or woman nowadays, the role estrogen and progesterone play, both negative and positive. But one of the things I learned about estrogen, whether being a man or a woman, that it always seems to trace back to some type of cancer because of the increase of estrogen and some of the things that are lacking in our diet. Here are some examples. And I said all this so that you could have a better idea of some of the things you can do before it comes to the point that it came to. But if you're questioning it and you're asking yourself, what's going on with me? And this being in case of dealing with women, estrogen and progesterone levels have to be equal, or you could see where they be tied to, the pituitary gland and all the other organs throughout your body, but mainly because it's attached to these other components, estrogen being one of them, and of course, an increase in cortisol levels. Now, this doctor, he's located in St. Louis, I believe, and he's one I would definitely recommend looking into or watching his YouTube videos. I will list a lot of the other videos down below. I said all this because, unfortunately, I hope nobody ever has to go through all the red tape that I had to go through. But I thank God for some of the things that I've been through at the same time, because I realize that there are societal things that we're going to have to overcome. And a lot of people will not go to the doctor. It has to get bad enough to finally get help. And sometimes family has to start paying attention to what we're trying to say. And one of the things I think is that a lot of people think they're smart, have book knowledge, but you have to go case by case. And luckily that we have enough doctors that have the licensing and background that they do, that know that just don't know. That's why it's always good to even consider a second opinion. Some people who go to doctors, they know there's a basic nutrition problem. That's pretty easy if you can look at somebody's body type and you can look at other factors. I also found out that a lot of times the foods that we crave have a lot to do with your body, your blood type. So it's amazing how many things play into our physiology and our anatomy. And I'm looking at the changes I had to go through and hopefully continue to go through, because it's not over for somebody like me. Even if you had surgery, I will have to go through numerous tests, CAT scans, just to keep up and see if this mass will continue to grow. And that's very hard for me to accept, because at some point or another, without this right amount of support, I will have to encounter the same things. And I hope by being open and honest about this, that it'll help me on this journey. One of the hardest things I've had to overcome is just getting the right information. And I know that there's some factors. Do I know if there's a quick fix? Absolutely not. Is there ways around it? Yeah. Can you survive it? Yes. I think there are things you have to educate yourself on. And there are some basic rules, like how does this affect my energy level? How does this affect my mental stimulation? Am I getting the proper amount of exercise? Am I getting outside more? And one of the drawbacks to having some, issues with your energy level is that you don't get outside as much as you need to. So you have to condition yourself to getting into a new routine. So obviously, I identified what's going on medically, and to get a better idea of why it is we never got the right kind of help to begin with is probably a couple factors, like I had mentioned. Not knowing the side effects of the medications you're taking as prescribed. And if you are taking them, could these be reasons why you're, diagnosed with a health condition? And I put the two together. it was pretty obvious. And luckily, I had doctors that I consulted with in Missouri, and they worked with me. And they knew one of my major concerns was anything injected or anything that I took by mouth, could this have an effect on my body? And they said yes. And how did we arrive to that? Because I can look at the same time I started taking these medicines and what happened. And it was just in a short amount of time that I noticed the significant changes in my body. And that's how I knew that it had something to do with that. But once I came to that realization that I would not be able to convince everybody, but at least I had discussed it with my doctors, and we both agreed that I needed to look for alternatives, other ways to get the right kind of help. I started the field report in 2007 because I had recognized that there was a lot I didn't understand, and I wanted to become more informed. And on this journey in the last 10 years, now that I've been able to put together a YouTube channel, I know that there are more things that I encountered I never thought I'd ever understand it. Even to this day, I'm hoping to better understand it. And I would start out as a student project. I realized and I recognized how important it is to be informed. And it wasn't because I just came to that revelation. It was because I started doing my homework. Believe it or not, when you start doing your homework, your ideas, your opinions improve. And I started to recognize why it is we don't know this, because you do have to go case by case. And you can't make it a generalization. And a lot of times people do. And one of the things I found, and a lot of people know this from me, after having received a few vaccinations, I was not the same. And it's the same goes as once you inject something into your body, you don't know how it's going to change you physiologically. And one of the other things I recognize is that after surgery, you're not sure how you're going to get back to who you are. So I came to this realization that those things, while it affected me, it doesn't have to make or break me. I do hope that everyone that's ever been down this road or going through it, or have just, maybe in the process of trying to make the changes you need to make, consider some things. It's always good to have support group. If you can't find it with your family, there's always church support. If not church support, group support is so essential. It makes it so much more bearable. One of the things I encounter is two sides to it. If you had a lot of support, which I did in the beginning, but going through it, it started to die off. So I know how important this is to somebody out there that's just found out, and that the fear and the uncertainty is very, very real. Because, you're precious, and you know that. You know that God cares about you, and He would not put you in the right, He wouldn't put you in the right path with the right people. And you'll know that going through this. One of the most amazing parts of this journey is the people you meet on it. It's very hard to overcome the obstacles, but with the right amount of support and the right kind of people, and even some people might even come around and recognize that they made a mischaracterization. Life is very hard when you encounter opposition as it is. I did not have an easy time with this at all. It was very hard to accept what was happening, but once I came to the realization I had to accept it and I was ready to move forward, is when I started healing slowly. But when I had some setbacks, which some people do, it can be very troubling. It can be very difficult. I had a lot of that as well. It's so important to get to know people in some way, somehow. I think people have a way of finding each other on this journey, and it's just incredible how many people I've met or I know that have had health issues or maybe had similar circumstances, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a man or a woman. And nowadays, estrogen and hormones can actually change both men and women differently, but very much present very similar symptoms. So I hope more people are more aware of this. They don't have to live with this tragedy. They can recover. And that's the journey we're on. And we're really just starting out from here, especially now. It's only been 6 months since my previous surgery, and the setbacks were unusually difficult this time around. So it might take me a little bit longer to recover, but I've learned in this that I got to take this slow, and it is one day at a time. Well, I do believe that some people need to be consistent. You will have to accept the fact there are ups and downs, but otherwise, it's always good to think about day one. To me, every day is day one. You got to start today. You can't wait till tomorrow, next week, put off your goals. And you really only can focus on today's goals. You can have a larger goal, but looking at today being the beginning, the starting point, day one.